This room is one of the three oval rooms, isn't that right, Mr. President?
Yes, the diplomatic reception room on the ground floor, and the blue room and my study on the second floor are all oval rooms. It's a beautiful room, this room is, and this point right here is where Mrs. Truman and I stand when we have state receptions.
Mrs. Truman on where I am or on your left?
Mrs. Truman's stands where you are, and just the other evening, we stood here and shook hands with 1,539 people by count.
My goodness.
The diplomatic reception.
They come through the door on your left and out into the red room.
That's
on
right.
The door over here.
And then go on into the dining room and have some cookies and punch and then go away.
How many of the names of people in a line that long can you normally remember, Mr. President?
Well, ordinarily, you take the congressional receptions and the judicial receptions. I know them all, and I remember them all, but in the diplomatic reception, there are people from all over the world, and I didn't remember very many of the names. Of course, I knew all the ambassadors, but that's about all.
What about the furniture in this room, Mr. President?
This furniture in this room was purchased by James Monroe in Paris when Jefferson was president. It's the only really antique furniture that's left. Of course, it's been upholstered time and again. And the clock here on the mantel was brought back here by James Monroe when Jefferson was president.
Did we take a closer look at the clock, Mr. President?
Yes, it's a beautiful clock. And it still keeps good time.
Is there any, I guess is that Minerva? I believe I've heard of a Minerva clock. Is that the Minerva clock, Mr. President?
I don't know. I can't answer you, Frank. That's either Minerva or I'm sure that is Pallas Athene.
Uh-huh. Do all these clocks run, Mr. President?
Yes, they all run.
In every room.
We have a special man winds clocks every Friday.
How about the hangings in this room, Mr. President? Of course, if our people could see the color, they'd see it was all blue. Has it always been a blue room?
Oh, no, it hasn't always been a blue room. That red couch down in the China room used to be in this room, and they had red furniture in here. But ever since I can remember, I think as far back as Cleveland's administration, it's been the blue room. And President Cleveland was married in this room.
Oh.
The only president to be married in the White House.
The only president to be married in the White House.
That's right.
Mr. President, wasn't it this ceiling that first began to tremble when you decided the White House needed to be renovated?
Yes, my study is right over this, and I had a tray brought to me for luncheon one day. I was here by myself. The family were at home, and the floor bounced up and down, and I had an engineer and an architect to come in, and they moved me out.
And that was the beginning of the renovation.
Of the disintegration.
Is there anything about this chandelier up here, Mr. President?
No, I don't know that these chandeliers, nearly all have been presented. Some of them since we've been here, some of them before. Some of the most beautiful chandeliers in the White House were taken down to the Capitol building and are still there. I tried to get them back, and they wouldn't let me have them.
You might take a look at the green room, the next room, Mr. President. The blue room, incidentally, which we just left, you said is under your study. That means it's under the more or less famous balcony that you had built out there. Is that correct?
Well, the balcony goes around the outside of it.
What is the green room used for, Mr. President?
This is where diplomats are received when they first come and where they usually pay their respects when they go to leave the country. It used to be a dining room in the old days, but that is up to Van Buren's time, I think. Mm-hmm. We have 4 presidential pictures in this room.
Could we move over here and take a look at this one on our left over here?
Jefferson's on the west wall. John Quincy Adams is on the east wall. And I was telling you a while ago about the old Chesapeake and Potomac Canal that interfered with the erection of the Washington Monument. Old John Quincy was down in that canal one morning taking a swim. He was an early riser, just like I am. An old lady went down and set on his clothes because she wanted a job, and she hadn't been able to get it.
Did she get it that time, Mr.
I understand that she did. Then on the north wall, we have James K. Polk and Martin Van Buren.
I wonder about this seal in the rug, Mr. President. If we step back, people might be able to take a look at it. That's again, the presidential seal, is that correct?
Yes, that's the presidential seal, and that's the new seal.
The one that you had designed.
That's right. The eagle's facing to the north, and we have the olive branch, and we have the 48 stars around the outside of it.
How about this mantle over here, Mr. President?
That's one of the Adams mantles. That's one of the old ones.
One of the original from...
One of the original. It's been in the White House ever since it was first built.
Incidentally, the green room, as I recall, is the only one of these rooms that has a color in its name that's always been that color. Is my understanding right on
I don't know for sure. That's what I've been told, but I can't pose as an authority on that.
I was also talking to your daughter a while ago, Mr. President. She tells me that this chandelier up here is one that was bought, I believe, by Mrs. Coolidge in the flea market in Paris. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding, yes.
Sort of a bargain that she picked up over there?
It's a beautiful thing. It's a very beautiful chandelier. All the chandeliers on this floor are lovely.
Mr. President, might we take a look at the East Room now?
Yes. Somebody stepped on the trigger and put his light out.
This, I guess, is the largest room in the White House, isn't it, Mr. President?
Yes, this is the ballroom. This is where all people assemble when we have state receptions. And then they march through the green room to the blue room, and then to the red room, then to the state dining room where they have refreshments.
Isn't this also where the people who come personally to the White House for a tour of the public rooms, this is where their upstairs tour begins?
This is where the tour begins, in the East Room. We're ending up where they usually begin. This is a picture of George Washington we're before now. It's an imitation steward. I understand that it's not a real steward.
That's Gilbert Stewart?
Yes, but I'm not sure about that. Some people say the steward painted the face and one of his hired help painted the rest of the figure. At any rate, Dolly Madison is credited with having saved it when the British burned the house.
Well, that's the one that she cut down and tucked under her arm and ran out the door with, Mr. President?
Well, that's the story, but that story isn't true. She took the frame, picture, and all, and took it away in a big wagon. But the story has always gone around that she cut the picture out of the frame, rolled it up, and put it under her dress, and took it with her. And one of the quiz kids one time asked President Roosevelt what sort of a knife she used to cut the picture out of the frame. And Mr. Roosevelt told me that he didn't hesitate a minute. He said, why, kitchen knife, of course.
This piano over here, Mr. President, seems
It's a wonderful Steinway piano. It's a beautiful piano and has one of the most wonderful tones of any piano I've ever heard.
You have a piano, I guess, in your study. Do you ever play the pianos in the public rooms, Mr. President?
Hardly ever.
I wondered if you would mind if I just hit a note of this piano so people can tell what a White House piano sounds like.
I'll show them what it sounds like.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Well, we have another piano up here, too, that's a good one. That was presented to the new White House by an American piano company, the Baldwin people. Mm-hmm. It's a lovely piano, too, in a mahogany case with silver trimmings, has a seal on the outside, and it also has a beautiful tone.
Fair to play both pianos, Mr. President.
Well, that's a beautiful piano. Both of them are. Sometime or other, I'm hoping to have a reception and have a two-piano concert here by a couple of the world's great pianists. I'm sure we'll have that one of these days.
You think you can do that while you're still in the White House, Mr. President? That's something to look forward to?
I can't do it any other time. I'm going to do it before I move out.
Mr. President, another thing about the East Room that I've heard, and I think you're the source of the story, is that Abigail Adams hung her wash in here before it was finished.
That's correct. if you read the life of Mrs. John Adams, Abigail Adams, it states there that the floor was not in the East Room when the Adamses moved in. They moved in 1798. The house was started in 1792. It wasn't finished by 1798. It was almost as slow a job as the one we just finished.
And so there was nothing to do with the room but use it as a laundry drying room, then, I suppose.
Well, that's what she used it for, but they finally finished it. And it's always been the state ballroom and the place for receiving the people who are here for diplomatic receptions and things of that sort.
Haven't there also, Mr. President, been some famous weddings in the East Room here?
Yes. One of the Wilson girls was married here. Alice Roosevelt was married in this room. And there was another, one of the White House daughters was married here, who my recollection is bad, but it's also been used for funerals. President Roosevelt's lay in state here, and President Harding, and nearly all the presidents who died in office have been lay in state here in this room.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. President. Now, if we can take a look at the date stone out here in the hall.
All right.
It's been very gracious of you to show us through the President's house, Mr. President.
I had to do it. Here's the dates of the construction of the White House. It was begun in 1792, finished in 1798, was burned in 1814, was reconstructed in 1817 and 18, and Theodore Roosevelt had it completely overhauled in 1902, and the last overhaul was just finished in 1952.
When do you think it's going to need it again, Mr. President?
Well, I think in about 1,000 years.
Well, Mr. President, wasn't it Theodore Roosevelt that added the West Wing?
Yes,
And
presidential office.
President Roosevelt added the East Wing.
That's correct.
Well, there was some remodeling, rather redecorating, wasn't there, several years ago, 1946 or so.
There have been several remodelings. Chester Arthur remodeled it one time. Calvin Coolidge put in a third floor. That's one of the reasons the house fell down. It was too heavy for the pillars.
Oh, really?
That's right. Put a concrete floor on top, and several of the presidents have made improvements and additions and things of that sort. You'll find now over here at the state stairway, as it comes out, the seals of all the original 13 states are around that entrance there.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank you again for being so gracious as to receive us.